And joining us now, senior advisor to the Biden transition team, Kate Bedingfield. Kate, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Does the president-elect have any concerns whether or not the President Trump's effort to overturn the election will succeed? And is he reconsidering at all his decision not to go to court, either one, to protect his victory in the election, and two, to try to force the transition to begin?
No, he does not have any concern. I think what we've seen over the course of the last few weeks are these lawsuits from the Trump campaign and their allies have been laughed out of court after court all across the country. They are getting absolutely no traction. We've seen the Republican governor and Republican Secretary of State in Georgia this week reaffirm the recount results there, reaffirm the outcome that Joe Biden won the state of Georgia. Look, Joe Biden won this election by 80 million votes. He won 306 electoral college votes, which is the same outcome from 2016 that Donald Trump called a landslide when he won 306 electoral college votes. So, no, we have absolutely no concern that this is going to have any outcome on the election itself. On your question about the transition and suing the GSA, I would say, look, litigation is not a panacea. It is not going to suddenly move things forward. What will move things forward is the GSA administrator signing the piece of paper. The statute says that it is her obligation to ascertain the apparent winner of the election. I don't think there's anybody in the world who would suggest, except maybe the folks around Donald Trump, that Joe Biden was not the apparent winner of this election. Again, he won 306 electoral college votes and 80 million votes from Americans all across the country. So she should ascertain the results of the election so that we can move forward with a seamless transition.
Now, in his defense, President Trump argues that Democrats sought to delegitimize his election from the very start in pushing the idea that there was a Russia collusion, pushing the Mueller investigation, even impeaching him. The president says that your side has no right to complain now when he is contesting this election.
That is, frankly, Chris, I think that is absurd. And that is an apples and oranges comparison at best. What we're talking about right now is Donald Trump actively trying to overturn the will of the American people state by state. And what we're seeing across the board is that courts across the country, governors and secretaries of state across the country are rejecting that. They're saying the election was fair, it was legitimate. Joe Biden won by a handy margin, again, a margin that Donald Trump himself called a landslide in 2016. And we're continuing to see Republicans come out and acknowledge this as well. Senator Toomey made a statement yesterday acknowledging Joe Biden as the president-elect and encouraging the transition to move forward. We've seen even Donald Trump's national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, has said that the transition should move forward. So I think all across the country, Americans.
But what about the argument if I may, what about the argument that Democrats were trying to overturn the legitimate election of Donald Trump, maybe not so much in contesting the election, but the way they acted on a number of fronts with investigations over the 4 years of his presidency?
I don't think that when a president gets elected that he is no longer held accountable as he moves through his administration. I think that's an incredibly different thing. I think investigations into whether a president has behaved appropriately or not are an entirely different matter than what Donald Trump is trying to do here, which is to actively overturn the will of the American people, to subvert the democratic system, to sow doubt about the foundations of our democracy. That is a completely different thing. And it's a PR stunt. It's a sideshow. I think you would only have to look at Rudy Giuliani's press conference a couple of days ago to appreciate that this is not a serious, sophisticated effort. And most importantly, it will fail. It has failed. It's continuing to fail because, again, Joe Biden overwhelmingly won this election, 360 electoral college votes. The American people voted for Joe Biden to be sworn in on January 20th, 2021, and he will be.
How many? We understand that it's been announced the president-elect is going to name some cabinet appointments on Tuesday. How many and which ones?
Well, I have been in this business long enough to know that I am not going to get ahead of President-elect Biden and his announcement. But you are right. We will be making our first cabinet announcements on Tuesday of this week. And, I would say the president-elect is very excited about this team and it looks forward to introducing them to the country.
Can you even tell us a number? How many?
I can't. Everyone will have to just tune in on Tuesday and it will be made known then.
Okay. The president also, president-elect, and we showed it in Jackie's piece, met with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer on Friday, and he talked afterwards about he wants to see a COVID relief bill passed by the lame duck Congress in the next couple of weeks. Can't wait till January 20th. Question, when is he going to meet with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell?
Well, he's looking forward to doing that when the time is right. Obviously, he and Senator McConnell have had productive working relationship in the past, and he looks forward to meeting with Senator McConnell when that moment arrives. But you're absolutely right. He believes that we need to get a relief bill done in the lame duck. People are hurting all over the country. People need money in their pockets to make rent. They need money in their pockets to afford groceries. Small businesses need that money. Teachers need that money. Tough decisions about layoffs of firefighters and essential workers are being made all over this country because Congress won't move forward on a package. So that is a priority for him. That is something that he's going to continue to push in the lame duck.
But Kate, you can't pass COVID relief without the Senate Majority Leader. He is the Majority Leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell. Is the president-elect ready to meet with him now? In other words, I'm trying to get a sense, is it President-elect Biden who's holding up the meeting, or is it Mitch McConnell?
We strongly hope that Senator McConnell will come to the table. I think if you look at where the Democrats have been across the entire course of this year, Democrats passed a bill back in May, and we've seen obstruction from Republicans. So obviously, we are very hopeful that Mitch McConnell will come to the table. It is important. People are expecting it. They voted for in this election. They voted for action. They voted for progress.
But just to
press
this, would Biden meet with McConnell right now?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. It is important that Senator McConnell come to the table, and we're very hopeful. We're very hopeful that we'll be able to see progress soon on this bill because people all across the country desperately need it.
The president-elect is already taking heat from the left wing of the Democratic Party. I want to play some of that we saw this week. Take a look.
We're going to make sure that the Biden administration sticks to our timeline, is moving towards our timeline. And so I ask all of you, do not move from the needle. Do not.
That's what our next move is to make sure that the Biden administration keeps its promise.
And Senator Bernie Sanders said it would be, quote, enormously insulting if Biden ignored the progressive community. So how much pressure does the president-elect feel to repay the left for its support in this election?
Joe Biden was elected with an incredibly broad coalition of voters and a broad coalition of support. That includes support from the progressive wing of the party. That includes support from the more moderate wing of the party. It included support from independents and Republicans. I mean, he won 80 million votes all across the country, a historic number of votes for a president-elect. Look, we have every intention, I can tell you definitively, Joe Biden is going to keep his promises. He laid out plans on this campaign that are bold and that meet the crises that we're facing. We're facing four incredibly overwhelming and historic crises in this country, including the public health crisis and the economic crisis that goes with it, in addition to the climate crisis and the racial injustice crisis that we're seeing in this country. He campaigned on bold plans to tackle all of those crises, right, and he has every intention of keeping his promises.
Kate, thank you. Thanks for joining us. I hope you get at least the day off for Thanksgiving, but I suspect it's a busy time for you.
It is, but thank you very much for having me. I appreciate being here, Chris.